This is the Benefits Buzz Podcast, your weekly pulse on what's happening in the world of employee benefits. Brought to you by your friends at WEX, who believe in simplifying benefits for everyone. Now listen up and let's get buzzed. Hey, it's another episode of Benefits Buzz. Thanks so much for joining us. I am your host, Eric Piella. And if you were a follower of Benefits Buzz, you know that our last episode, we hit on the 8 must-knows around health savings accounts. And of course, those are great, dare I say, selling points of the power and value of HSAs. But in this follow-up episode, we want to dive a little bit more deeper into how you can position and help understand how your current employees and consumers are perceiving HSAs so that you can better position and show value around a full total rewards strategy. And to do so, we actually partnered with HR Dive. Our very own Jason Cook, who is our VP and HSA practice lead, discussed how we really want to look at HSAs. In particular, we did some really powerful research, partnered with Visa to really dive into how do we perceive and understand HSA so that you can fully understand and be a part of your strategic benefits package. It's a really cool dialogue, a really cool discussion, and I can't wait to share it and pass along to our listeners as well. So buckle up. It's time to get buzzed and enjoy this week's episode.
Hello and welcome to this session provided by WEX. My name is Megan Billingsley and I'll be your moderator today. I'm delighted to be joined by Jason Cook, Vice President and HSA Practice Lead at WEX, to discuss a topic that's increasingly important for personal finance and healthcare, driving adoption and engagement for health savings accounts. As employers face challenges like exponential health benefit cost increases, it's more important than ever to offer affordable and accessible financial planning options for employees, especially as they become more skeptical about their ability to retire. Today, we'll be discussing how HSAs can be a key part of your total reward strategy, helping you to craft a show-stopping benefits package for open enrollment. We have a lot to cover, but if you have any questions for Jason at any time, please add them to the Q&A panel found to the right of the video window, and we'll follow up after the event. So Jason, let's begin by talking about the research that WEX did in partnership with Visa to try and understand the key motivators and barriers to HSA adoption and how we can effectively communicate with consumers.
Hey, Megan, thank you for having me. And I tell you, that's a great place to start because this is really a reboot from our original Voice of the Consumer research study that we did with Visa in 2019. And so this research had both a qualitative and a quantitative approach that included 15 60-minute interviews and 1,500 online panel responses. And so now our main purpose, both then and now, was to understand, consumers' perceptions, their attitudes, and their behaviors towards health savings accounts, including, both those who use them and those who don't use them. And so this is what we refer to in the research as our adopters and our non-adopters. Now, we really wanted to understand 5 key aspects of HSA adopters and non-adopters. And that was really, I guess starting with number 1, we wanted to explore what motivates consumers to use their HSA. Then we wanted to identify what keeps them, keeps non-adopters, I should say, from converting to HSAs. We also wanted to understand, who in their network consumers look to for advice related to health savings accounts. We wanted to identify what tools consumers are using and what they find useful. And then, the last one kind of segmented it into 2. We wanted to determine what key messaging would engage non-adopters to take action and consider opening an HSA. And for those adopters that already have an account open, what messaging could help influence their behavior in a positive way, right? And so, and when I say influence behavior in a positive way, I mean things like increasing contributions to the health savings account, retaining more assets, year over year in the HSA, and taking advantage of the investment component of the health savings account. And so, I really think it's important, to influence employee behavior in a positive way, because just opening the account doesn't make an employer's HSA program a success, nor does it make the employee, more financially secure, right? Just opening the account and not funding it, for example, means that the employee is taking on more risk with the higher deductible, and they're not offsetting the risk with all of the advantages that the HSA has.
Yeah, thank you. I found having an HSA to be hugely beneficial. So I am curious, what were the key emotional needs that your research uncovered when it comes to healthcare insurance and HSAs?
Fantastic question. Great question. So, we found that several emotional themes consistently resonate with consumers, and these include a desire for less anxiety and stress, having peace of mind, a sense of control, and feeling more confident and financially secure. And so it's very interesting because with the 2019 study and this year's research, we found that, the emotional benefits resonate in many cases more so than the rational benefits. And so, Megan, if you're thinking about the rational benefits, think about those benefits that make good financial sense. Things like the triple tax savings that the HSA affords, right? So if we think about the triple tax savings, that's contributions to the HSA are tax-free, appreciation of invested assets are tax-free, and distributions when taken for qualified medical expenses are also tax-free. Now, you also have the FICA tax savings when contributing to the HSA through payroll. And then think about, lower premiums that are realized when opting for the HSA eligible health plan, right? These are the make sense benefits that, we all talk about during open enrollment. But when, we heard from the consumer, it's really the emotional benefits that resonated as the reasons for why they love their HSA, right? So things like, again, an HSA gives me peace of mind, less anxiety and stress, confidence, a sense of financial security and control. And then, I tell you, with this year's study, we found that employees with an HSA also feel empowered. And right, these are all very powerful adjectives being used by adopters to describe their feelings towards their health savings account. I found it very interesting.
Yeah, it's a powerful connection between a financial product and emotional well-being. Can you elaborate on the specific benefits that motivate people to adopt and use an HSA?
Yeah, absolutely. First, let's first talk about the functional or the rational benefits because, while employees have more of an emotional connection with their health savings account after the account is opened, employees considering opting into an HSA for the first time, they really need to understand what the advantages are for opting into an HSA eligible health plan and opening an HSA, right? What's in it for me, right? Why am I going to benefit from this? So if I think about the functional or the rational benefits, tax advantages, right? We talked about this before. It's the most tax advantaged account that an employee can opt into. But I also looked at like employer contributions, right? Employer contributions, this is the free money. And whether an employer is funding or matching HSA contributions, this is money that should be thought of like an employer 401k match, right? And the mantra over there is, don't leave free money on the table. I think, we're all comfortable talking about in retirement, don't leave that employer 401k match. We're not so much comfortable, not as comfortable talking about it with the HSA. Planning for unexpected medical expenses, right? Very rational benefit. And we know that virtually all health insurance plans come with some sort of a deductible. So there's going to be out-of-pocket spend. And so, using the HSA to cover that out-of-pocket spend provides the employee with meaningful tax savings because they're tax-free distributions. And so there's a whole bunch of these, again, rational benefits. I could probably list off 10 more, but I'll round it out with smart investing. So smart investing, this would be thinking of the HSA like a 401k, right? And dollar cost averaging the HSA so that an employee isn't trying to time the market, right? And you don't want to buy at market highs and sell at lows, and you want it smoothed out, investing on a regular basis. And so, dollar cost averaging is a concept that I always talk about when using the HSA as an investing tool. But it's also helping employees understand that investing HSA dollars is a hedge against medical inflation, right? I mean, so if you think about the HSA, there's two components of it. There's this cash component, and then there's this investment vehicle that ties into it. The cash component, looks and feels like a checking account in many instances, and it pays interest comparable to that. And so if you're trying to meet a 5 to 6% medical inflation year-over-year rate, keeping the money in cash isn't going to do what it needs to do. And so we talk about, really the importance of investing on a regular basis. Now, on the emotional side of things, emotional benefits, again, peace of mind. So adopters of HSAs, cited, having peace of mind and knowing that there's this bucket of money set aside for unexpected medical expenses. Financial security, this is really those that have invested over the past few years have seen, really, really good returns. And now they're recognizing that they have balances that have grown faster than they originally anticipated. And so, that higher balance provides the financial security. And then, I mentioned it before, empowerment. And, this came across with the sense of confidence that HSA adopters have, right? It's almost like they understand that they're self-funding a portion of their healthcare. and can decide if they want to use HSA dollars or if they want to save those, HSA dollars for future medical expenses.
Perfect. Thank you. So now let's shift to the other side of the coin. What are the key barriers that prevent people from adopting an HSA?
So key barriers, and when I think about key barriers, I think about the non-adopters. So the non-adopters are an interesting group because in many instances, we saw that an employee made the wrong financial decision because it felt better to stay with the status quo, right? So back to the power of emotional decision-making, right? It felt better to stay with something comfortable rather than, taking time to understand something new. And so that's important because people need to understand something new, especially if there's a financial benefit to it. So that's what I'd say. Number one, I'd also say that our research identified other key barriers like the high deductible health plan or HSA eligible health plan was not the best fit, or even lack of awareness of the HDHP. And lack of awareness was, we saw these individuals typically stuck with the traditional or HMO plan through a passive enrollment, which isn't always the best thing. Contribution and spending rules are confusing, not knowing how much to set aside or if I'll have enough money to contribute to the account. And really, I'd say an overarching theme of a fear for trying something new. But I'd also say it was very interesting to understand how both these HSA adopters and non-adopters viewed why somebody would open a health savings account. And for the adopters who have a health savings account, they viewed other adopters and they viewed them as being organized and financially healthy and well prepared. And for the non-adopters, their number one response was that a person opens an HSA because they've got a lot of medical expenses. So let me say that again another way. Like the reason somebody opens an HSA is because they're incurring a lot of medical expenses. And now that's important to unpack because, an employee that has few medical expenses may view the HSA as not relevant to their personal situation, when in actuality, they're really the ones that are in the best position to take advantage of the HSA's saving power for future medical expenses down the line. So yeah, I would say, I believe one of the biggest barriers that prevent people from adopting an HSA is a lack of understanding that the account is actually relevant to their personal situation. And as we know, if someone doesn't relate to something, they will not take the time to learn about it, even if it's in their best financial interest.
I think that's a really solid point because it sounds then like education is a big piece of the puzzle. So what are some of the key takeaways then for improving messaging and communication to encourage adoption?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Yeah, I think so. Our key takeaways highlight the importance of simplifying and tailoring the message. So simplify the message, and you can simplify the message really by losing the jargon, lose the industry jargon and speak directly to employees in a manner that they can consume. Right? For example, instead of saying triple tax savings, like I mentioned before, and FICA tax savings, say it's the most tax advantaged account out there that you can opt into, right? I mean, not everybody understands FICA tax savings and these nuances that we throw around within the industry. Another one would be, instead of talking about the HSA as being a portable account or portability, simply say that it's an account that you own. And you can take it all the way with you into retirement if you choose. So nobody's going to take that account away from you. Nothing's going to be forfeited. It's yours until you don't want it anymore. I would also say, highlight employer contributions. If you're providing employer contributions, highlight that as free money. Really, making the connection to the 401k match again, it really is free money. If you're offering an employer contribution, whether it's through, a matching contribution or so forth, get them to understand that, it's incredibly important to take advantage of that.
Excellent.
If you're not offering an employer contribution, consider taking some of the premium savings and channeling a portion of that savings to the employee's HSA. Now, employer contributions are cited as the number one way to increase employee adoption of the HSA. So, I really am a huge proponent of structuring the plan designed to include contributions. Last thing I'll get to are educate the non-adopters. Really make it relevant to non-adopters. We can talk to all, well, I say we can't talk to all employees the same way, because no two employees are in the same life stage or financial situation. So for example, right, if an HSA is referred to as a medical 401k, which it is, that's a total true statement, but that's not a relevant statement to all employees because not all employees will invest HSA dollars. And so that's perfectly fine because employees that don't invest HSA dollars still are in most cases are still making the best financial decision by opening and funding an HSA. And so I think, one of the most powerful things an employer can do to increase the adoption is to make the HSA relevant to the entire benefits eligible population, right? It's easier said than done, right, Megan? But, so how do employers do it? And I think they should understand that their benefits eligible population is made up of, many different personas, and highlight these personas during open enrollment and clearly articulate why the HSA would benefit that specific segment of the employee population, right? So the persona spectrum will range from, employees looking to maximize investments to others concerned with monthly cash flow and everything in between, right? So those that have large number of medical expenses, those with few medical expenses, employees that have large families, single employees on individual coverage. But, at the end of the day, all employees on the spectrum need to understand that in most cases, it's the right financial decision to opt into an HSA eligible health plan and open the HSA. But I tell you, excuse me, they will only opt into an HSA if they understand the functional and emotional benefits and they feel good about making that decision.
Excellent point. Thank you so much. This has been incredibly insightful, and it's clear that understanding both the functional and emotional drivers, as you said, is key to a successful adoption strategy. So, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Megan, thank you for having me today, and I hope all this information helps everyone here in their efforts to drive HSA adoption and engagement. So thanks.
Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed that discussion with HR Dive and our very own Jason Cook. A lot of fun takeaways from that discussion. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. If you are a fan of Benefits Buzz, we would love it if you gave a review for our podcast, and likewise, make sure you subscribe for all of our upcoming episodes. Thanks so much and have a great day. WEX is in the business of simplifying benefits for everyone. Now, although we certainly hope our podcast sparks some aha moments, like that was pretty cool, but of course we cannot provide legal, investment, or financial advice. And, well, therefore, nothing shared in this podcast should be interpreted as such. We encourage you to seek out appropriate professional advice regarding your plans. Hey, congratulations! You made it through our disclaimer. Thanks for listening.